weave together some of my own transformational vortex that I've been in, which has been about growing older. Nobody taught me how to grow older. And also, Jack and I literally came back this morning from a travel adventure that we've been on to Cairo to see the pyramids, and then to go to Petra to see this ancient town built into the wilderness there. What occurred to me and Jack as we were traveling and talking and exploring and stepping outside our comfort zone is that that's what travel does. And how do we learn about ourselves in the process of stepping outside our comfort zone? Now, travel can be fun and exciting, and it can also be bring us a little bit more to our edge. And Jack and I certainly noticed that as we had anxiety come up at different times. We had never traveled in that same way in the Middle East. We didn't really know Jordan. We didn't know what it would be like. We rented a car and we traveled. We didn't know what the infrastructure would be like. So we really were at the edge of our vulnerability and our comfort zone. And we both had our anxieties show up in different ways at different times. And when we went into Petra, which is really a mind-boggling experience, it's hours away by car from Amman, the big city of Jordan. And then we drove to the Dead Sea, and that's out again in the middle of nowhere. What occurred to me, what was it like for these explorers to travel into these unexplored wildernesses without the certain infrastructure that we had? And we were dealing with anxiety, given our modern capacities and Google Maps, which thank God works hours away in this landscape. And so there were certain ways that our anxiety could be tempered, but what is it like when we're not? And I thought about this Swiss explorer. He was 27 years old, Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, who actually found this place. I think it was in 1812, I think it was. I thought, what was it like? How do you manage whatever's going on inside? I can only imagine of course, he's an explorer. He wants to go out there. But as I've talked often about, anytime we step outside of our comfort zone, we're going to have some form of anxiety or trepidation. What I noticed watching our anxiety come up about traveling, and I thought it's also coming up about growing older and thinking about dying, and what is that like? That's a whole other journey. That all brought me to a whole other idea of what happens when we step outside our comfort zone. How do we deal with these stages of distress, which of course brought me back to Bowlby and Robertson exploration of the separation distress and protest, despair, and detachment. And I thought to myself, because I could see inside myself, there was active protest, like when I would get anxious about something, like when Jack said, Google Maps is directing us this way and I'm driving and we're going up over this one-lane highway, not a highway, one-way road going nowhere, and it's over a hill and you can't, I could feel my anxiety rise. That's one thing. That's a known anxiety. That's a known protest. And I thought, what about those ways where we don't know our protest? And it had me reflect on Bowlby and Robertson's ideas of separation distress. And that protest, their first phase is a very active phase of expressing our distress. And especially in terms of attachment, wanting the loved one to stay, where we cry or scream or we have tantrums and we do whatever we can to follow the person or point and signal and trying to energetically drag the person back to us. We're looking for proximity and contact. That's what this active stage of protest is all about. We can get angry, but we do it visibly and in expression. And we show displeasure when we don't get what we want. And we can, and I don't know if any of you have ever done this, I know I have, is we try to punish the person if they don't do what we want, right? Like maybe we withdraw or we get angry in return. Now, thankfully, that those forms didn't show up on our trip, but I know those places inside me. That's how an active form of protest shows up. So think about the times when that's been true for you, when we've actively wanted something and been able to express it and be not hiding it from ourselves. But what I realized is, as I thought about my own journey of getting older, is that there were ways where I wasn't aware, where hopelessness and helplessness came up, that they're more undercover, more hidden from me. And I feel like I know myself pretty well. But anytime we enter these new states, we're going to have new expressions come up, which again brought me back to Bowlby and Robertson research. So protest is that first phase, and then despair is a second. And in this despair phase, it's a withdrawing. And if we think of it energetically inside ourselves, instead of being active in our protest, we start withdrawing externally, but we're also withdrawing internally. We're trying to manage the distress in any way that we can. The active protesting stops or slows down, even though we might still be upset inside. We might show sadness or let ourselves be seen in the distress, but it's more quiet and might actually become more lethargic. We might appear miserable or unhappy. We might stop engaging or playing or being connected. We might, definitely in the research, it's about stopping exploring and stepping outside of the comfort zone. And eventually we appear to be less overtly upset, or we're less overtly engaging in the protest and the active protest. And we might even appear to be calming down and settling in, but that can be deceiving because it's a way of managing the strong feelings. And so the strong feelings get more compartmentalized. So that's that second phase. And the third phase is one of detachment. And we can think of it, we're holding ourselves together until the loved person, the object, comes back. And if the separation of the distress continues, we start disengaging, not just externally disengaging, but internally disengaging from ourselves. That's more of the dissociation that goes on. It's more where hopelessness and helplessness happens because we don't know how to manage this internal experience. On the surface, we might appear less withdrawn and less sullen, but we're disconnected inside. And it also can be a place where strong anger comes out, or pushing away verbally or behaviorally comes out. And it really is about a way to pull back from the internal pain of being disconnected out there, but disconnected inside. It's more than we can bear. We're separating externally as a way to internally disengage. And this can be true even when external people try to engage and reconnect with us. We have started to go further and further away inside, and we're almost can't make the connection inside. And I know people that I've worked with have often talked about, they know, like they can actually see it happening, they just can't link it into their energetic, emotional experience. So these two things are happening. And we think about it, I talk about it as the parallel lives, that there are these two things happening and they're disconnected. And our task in healing is how do we link it together?